So it's Danny Flexen here for Seconds Out. Delighted to be joined for the first time in a long time, far too long, by Lou DiBella. It's the return of the Mac, I think is how I put it on the invitation. But it's the return of the digest after a long time away. It got people through the pandemic.
Digest got me through the pandemic, so I continue to thank you for that. But good to see you, Dan. Good to finally do this. Nice to have a little wrap-up talk.
Yeah, and you, Lou. And we're going to do like a review of 2023 first of all. And we were talking a little bit off camera about how the power base in boxing now seems to have shifted very much from the likes of Las Vegas and New York, perhaps to a lesser extent, and also the UK, over to Saudi Arabia and the Middle East, highlighted by the show we've got as we talk now. Tomorrow, the Day of Reckoning takes place in Riyadh. What do you make of it? First of all, what do you think were the structural boxing reasons why there was this opportunity for the Middle East to come in?
Every time there's hardship in an industry or a sport, there's opportunity. I think it's a year where Showtime closed its doors, went the way of HBO. Big blow to boxing fans, particularly on my side of the pond, but I think a blow to boxing fans everywhere. You know, there are many that, because we got a couple of very big pay-per-view fights this year, a few fights people have been waiting for. A lot of people want to proclaim this one of the great years in boxing history. I don't see it that way. I do think there were some great fights, but I also think it was a year that was emblematic of the continued struggles we have as a sport and an industry, where a major player left the industry, where our biggest and best fights now always occur on pay-per-view on a transactional basis. So I don't think we're growing fans the way we need to. I think we can argue that UK boxing maybe is not as strong as it was a few years back. But that being said, it was an interesting year. We got some real good fights. We got some big stuff. I think the environment for the Saudis to make a play stemmed from a couple of things. I think they are very focused on marketing their very advanced 21st century country. I mean, I have Alex over there in Saudi right now. He says, it's amazing how metropolitan it is, how different from what maybe people would anticipate. And I think the Saudis, this is a marketing play for them. They don't care about, they're not counting every pay-per-view buy or view. They're not sitting there worried about how much of the money they're spending is coming back. This is part of Riyadh season. This is part of an effort to market their country, to present to the world who they are, try to change some minds and hearts about their country. I don't think they're hiding. People want to use terms or pejorative terms like sports washing or whatever. They're attempting to use sport as a way to reach out to people and to attract people to their country and to change people's views that may have been formed over years about, their country. I'm putting politics aside totally here, okay? And I'm not saying I agree with every, because I don't. A lot of things in Sharia law trouble me. A lot of things that are policies in Saudi Arabia may trouble me, but that's true of countries all over the world, right? So I'm just talking about what they're doing with respect to the sport. And I think that in an effort to use sport to showcase their country, boxing is one of the sports like golf and football that they've chosen to invest in. I think that heavyweight boxing is always traditionally, historically been the biggest and best of boxing. It's been where we have developed our most fans. It's the heavyweight champion of the world was always perceived as the baddest man on the planet. And they're throwing a lot of resources into building and reestablishing the heavyweight division. And I think in doing that, they're serving, they're actually doing pretty good stuff for boxing. I think the heavyweight division has been dead for most of this past year. And, the Saudis have revived it. And the show that's about to take place with all these, Joshua fighting, Wilder fighting, loads of ranked heavyweights on the card. It's going to give an opportunity for people to sit there and spend the day watching heavyweight boxing and, gear us up for next year where you might get to see Joshua and Wilder, though I think I wouldn't be shocked if there's some kind of wrench that gets thrown into that. I think neither guy has an easy fight, and I actually think that I think that AJ has a real dangerous fight. Personally, I'm not going as far necessarily as picking Whalen, but I'll tell you this: I think if you gave me a bag of money and said, "Look at the odds and bet the fight," I think Whalen's a pretty attractive underdog. Um, I think that the Saudis saw an opportunity to come in at the highest level of the biggest event and to use their marketing clout and their money to create excitement in the heavyweight division in boxing. And I think that they've done a good job. I mean, in terms of the marketing materials for these fights that they've done, the way they've approached the sport, the care they've taken to fly in some of our older fighters, many of whom, frankly, really could use that fee that they got paid to show up. I think that they've treated the sport with care and respect, and if you're looking at it just from the standpoint of how their involvement is affecting the boxing industry, put everything else aside, like I said, they've been a positive force, and it's filling a void right now because this is not a booming time for televised boxing.
And you alluded earlier to Showtime departing from the sport after such a long time involved. And we've seen PBC since do a deal with Amazon Prime, although it seems like a great deal of that will be on pay-per-view. What do you make of those two occurrences, Showtime departing and Amazon entering?
Look, nobody sells as much worldwide as Amazon of everything. And Amazon's already messed around with selling pay-per-views in Japan. They've already, Noyes pay-per-views have been distributed by Amazon in Japan. So the idea that they believe that they can be a distribution mechanism for pay-per-view programming makes perfect sense. And they're already NFL games on Thursday nights are now on Amazon Prime. So the idea that they would want to distribute Canelo fights and Davis fights and the biggest pay-per-view events makes perfect sense. They're better at selling most things. They are a near monopoly. They're an enormous sales entity worldwide, unmatched, right? So, but it's pay-per-view. It's another form of transactional distribution. Now, Amazon Prime's in loads and loads of homes. If you've ordered from Amazon, you can get Amazon Prime. So it's available to a lot of people. The question I'm going to have is how much programming are we going to see that's not pay-per-view through Amazon? And what's the quality of that program going to be? Is it going to be a loss leader to draw eyeballs to boxing and to help promote those pay-per-views? Are we going to see real good fights because an investment's being made in bringing boxing fans to Amazon? Or are we going to see sort of the run-in-the-mill non-pay-per-view fights we used to see on Showtime Boxing? Because if you're going to see those, and it's harder to get the programming for a lot of people, they don't think about Amazon Prime as the first place to look for boxing. Casuals aren't channel surfing or looking on a particular night for Amazon Prime. So that's the difference of an ESPN or even a Showtime for people that have pay cable, or a Sky in the UK. If there's boxing on a particular night, you're looking for something to watch, you go through the guide, you see boxing. I don't know. I think Al's a very smart guy, Heyman. When he lost Showtime, he was going to find a place. I'm sure the economic deal for distributing pay-per-views that Amazon is offering is probably more favorable than what the cable and satellite and traditional distribution mechanisms for pay-per-view have done. I'm guessing that Heyman got a good deal. Time will tell. But there's a shift going on in sports in general to streaming. There's a shift going on in programming in general and content in general to streaming. Most things are becoming transactional, right? So you want it, you pay for it. You pay for a season subscription. You pay for a pay-per-view event. It's in a perfect world, I think you need more of a mix. You need eyeballs that are very accessible to create interest, so that interest exists to pay that transactional $80 in the US or $90 in the US for a big pay-per-view. I think in a perfect world, it's not a pay-per-view only or transactional only sport, because I think that limits your fan base. But I certainly think the streaming move is simply a natural progression. I don't know if you'd say progression, but yeah, progression. It's a natural progression of where content and programming is going. It's going to, transactional ways of acquiring the programming, as opposed to it appearing on your, linear TV. Just the way it is. I think there's not an endless stream of money that fans are going to pay. I don't think the average fan is going to subscribe to DAZN and 4 other streaming services, particularly for boxing. But fans are, got to remember another thing. Boxing fans have access to Amazon Prime. So if there's a fight on Amazon Prime, that fight fan, if he's reading boxing press, if he's following the sport, he's going to find his way to it. What concerns me a little bit is in a generation where our fan base is still older a bit than other sports, how's this going to affect our ability to grow younger fans? And because I don't think that fans that have been exposed to boxing necessarily run. But look, the influencer fans, the celebrity boxing fans, the Jake Paul kind of fans, they're already finding their programming through streaming and through their devices other than a television set. So, it's not a death knell or anything, but I think we're changing the way the sport is being marketed, presented, and distributed. And we have to be cognizant of what we need to do to create a fan base and build a fan base.
And from your own personal perspective, tell us about your 2023, particularly in boxing, promotionally and so on.
I've continued to do my thing, and my fighters have fought, and I have some young, fighters like Kurt Scooby. I'm very excited by. I think he's going to be could be a real star. The Mongolian Mole, Zenbatar, exciting kid. I got to get control of this kid because he's a wild man. But in the ring, he's one of the most exciting young kids I've worked with recently. I'm continuing to do my thing. I'm not really looking to grow the number of fighters I work with. I'm 60, low 60 something right now, right? And I'm not anywhere near where I'm thinking about retiring or anything. But I'm running 2 baseball teams. I've been working this year, 2023. Frankly, for me, was heavily a year of baseball. For the first time in my career, I think the amount of time I spent on boxing relative to baseball, the very much the scales changed. I think this year I probably spent about 70%, 60 to 70% of my time on the baseball stuff, largely because in Richmond, Virginia, we're working to try to get a new ballpark built. And it's been between dealing with politicians and architects and engineers and loads of people. It's been a really almost a full-time job. And I think maybe putting boxing in that kind of a place where for a year it wasn't dominating my life made this year a little bit more pleasant with respect to working in boxing, because just perspective-wise, I didn't have the same amount of time, so I probably was more efficient in what I'd done this year in boxing. We're looking toward potentially a Lomachenko-Kambosos fight in 2024 in Australia. Hopefully we'll have something done with Top Rank and be able to announce something soon. We've been dealing with dates and venues and working out the deals with the fighters. Maxi Hughes I'm looking to get Maxi a title elimination bout, a eliminator for the mandatory in the IBF. So we're working on that. I think that there's probably a likelihood that he would fight William Zepeda, which would be a terrific fight. So the stuff I'm working on, I have Junior fighting Frank Sanchez on this show in Saudi, a very difficult fight for Junior, but it's an opportunity that he needs. So I've kept myself busy. In terms of what I've done in boxing this year, it's been our fighters have fought. We've co-promoted some good shows in New York City. I've continued to maintain Broadway boxing as an active brand. All things being considered, it was a fine year, and no personal tragedies or horrors in 2023, which is always a good thing. Overall, it was a good year. But like I said, it was very much for me. When I look back in years and times or whatever, this is a year where I was immersed in minor league baseball, which I love baseball. And it's probably my favorite sport. So it's up there with boxing. It's with boxing. It's in that echelon of the top rung for me. So I as much as it's been a trying year with all the work that I've been doing in baseball, particularly, hopefully it'll turn out to be a fruitful one. But it was a fine year, and it was an interesting year also to step back as someone that's been in boxing for 35 years at this point, and to watch how things are changing. I think we're entering and we're in a period of transition. I think you're going to see fighters that have been overpaid. I think you're going to see their pay adjusting. I think I think there's an opportunity for new players, but players that are going to come in and provide opportunity to what I would call the middle class of fighters, which almost doesn't exist any longer. The professional fighter who's a challenger, a contender, but needs to fight 3-4 times a year to make a living. I think if someone comes in and says, I want to do a regular series at of competitive 50-50 type of fights, and pay fighters just fair wage, I'm not talking about the stars. I think there's an opportunity to create some new programming, and I think someone's going to do it eventually. If you're fighting on pay-per-view and your fights are losing money for the people promoting them, that's not going to continue forever.
No.
So I think there are going to be adjustments. Now, the adjustments work two ways also. If you're Canelo Alvarez, you have a tremendous amount of leverage to be paid what you generate. And I don't think it's going to be a matter of cutting the fighter's pay. I think it's going to be a matter of you're paid what you generate. You're paid based upon what you generate. And that's generating it at the gate. If you're a ticket seller and you're capable of selling out of room, we've had fighters fighting on pay-per-views where people have been charged $80 US a fight, where the fighter can't draw fucking 5,000 people. Well, if you're not drawing 5,000 people to the fucking venue, you're not generating the millions of dollars you think you're worth, in all likelihood. And the pay-per-view results have sort of showed that. There are, we have a handful in America right now, pay-per-view stars. Canelo Alvarez, Gervonta Davis. I think Devin Haney and other fighters have proven that the platform works for them. But then when you look at the results of certain fights, you realize that the platform works depending on the matchup, right? Davis versus Ryan Garcia was a mega fight. Davis may be more of a pay-per-view star than others. He can argue about who's a bigger star, but he needed Ryan Garcia. And as much as I think Ryan Garcia is a star, Ryan Garcia needed a Gervonta Davis to create that fight that did, most of 1 million homes, which we don't hear about any longer. That was the one truly transcendent fight of the year, right? And it's between two guys who have independent markets and star power. There aren't a half dozen of them right now. The health of the sport doesn't ride with Canelo Alvarez, Gervonta, and Ryan Garcia. There are thousands of world-class fighters all over the world struggling to make a living, and we need to basically do better with our normal average fight. The fight you're going to see on Sky, the fight you're going to see on ESPN, that and the fights you're going to see maybe on Amazon Prime that are not pay-per-view. We need to make quality matchups, and it's not necessarily even about the names. We got to go back to the thought product. I've been watching this Pro Box TV for nothing lately, and I've been sort of surprised by how good the matchups have largely been. And I'd rather watch a super competitive fight between two guys that are not necessarily stars, but are guys with big winning records and quality fighters. I'd rather watch two guys rumble in a 50-50 fight than watch some guy I heard of beat the shit out of a guy that shouldn't be in the ring with him. And that's always been the case. We've had this discussion many, many times. But I think the average person who is a boxing fan, they don't know the names of our fighters. They couldn't recognize most of them walking down the street. But they know when they're channel surfing and they stop on a good fight, when two guys are beating the hell out of one another or two women are going at it, they know that they're watching a fight. And I think that a boxing fan, that it's not necessarily, I don't believe that a Morel or a Benavides, or go through the list of these other fighters, as good as they must be, I don't think they're transcending to average sports fans. I don't think most of the domestic level British fighters are transcending to general sports fans. But if you show quality fights and quality matchups where the outcome is in doubt, where you might actually bet upon a fight, or you're watching a fight and you're not sure while you're watching it, in the third round, you're not sure about at the end of the fight who's going to be the winner, that's boxing. That's sport. That's competitiveness. And we have to create more of that. And we have to insist on more of that. And that has to become more our norm if we're going to raise up our fan base, and we're going to raise up the level of our programming. 2023 wasn't a bad year, but the bad signs for the constriction of the sport and the maybe the more niche nature of the sport, those telltale signs were still there this year. There was still some great fights. There was some good action. Wasn't all over a horrible year. But, you know, it's on December 29th, nobody at Showtime is going to have a job, because Showtime Boxing will no longer exist. And, you know, Showtime Boxing for American boxing fans has been part of their lives for most of them, a lot of them. For me, for most of my life, for people younger than me, for their entire lives. And the two entities that were most, you know, out of the three entities most associated with boxing in the U.S., Showtime, I mean HBO first, Showtime, ESPN, 2 out of the 3 are now gone. So you can't look at that and celebrate that. You have to look at that and be a little self-reflective and say, why did that happen? Yeah, some of it is because premium cable probably doesn't work perfectly any longer for live sports. But it worked perfectly when the eyeballs were greater, and it worked perfectly when the audience was bigger. Yeah, we have more selection now when things are digital. Everything is streaming. Okay, that's true. But I don't think the NFL, I don't think football and Europe, I don't think they're growing. They're not growing based upon transactional stuff. They're not growing. You don't grow a sport through pay-per-view. You capitalize on the popularity of your sport through pay-per-view. So where an Amazon makes a deal that's clearly pay-per-view centric, I'm not going to sit there and be negative about it. Heyman had to do something, and I think that Amazon could be a terrific partner. I want to see how it develops. But innately, a deal that's centered on pay-per-view doesn't suggest to me a deal that's going to transform anything or change the nature of our programming or fan base.